It being 7:35, I'd like to call this meeting of the Capital Planning Committee to order. Just a reminder that this meeting is being broadcast live on Chelmsford Telemedia. One consideration when anyone that's coming up to speak, even though, just a reminder that Telemedia has asked that if there are more than one presenter, please speak into the microphone, and we'll just provide each. I'll turn this if you need to, and just so we can provide each person. That way, anyone that may be watching this at home can better hear the discussion and conversation. First on the agenda this morning, for the agenda that's posted, is the cemetery department. The cemetery superintendent has informed me he will not be able to make it. He's actually out plowing due to the storm, so the cemetery hearing is going to be rescheduled for November 30th. So that brings us to municipal facilities. And if you're following along, municipal facilities has 3 projects this year that are proposed. They're numbered 14, 15, and 16 on your detail sheet packet. So I'd like to invite Gary Persichetti and Kathleen Canavan to come up. What do you have first, John? First one is item 14. Pickup. Facilities pickup.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The facilities pickup, which, as you know, has been on for a couple of years and has been cut off a couple of years because of budgets. It's back again, and basically what's happened since then is the vehicle we're trying to replace has even deteriorated more. It's a 2006 with 90,000 miles on it, and really is not worth putting any more money into. And where we've deferred it a couple of years, we'd like to just get this done.
Gary, note that it's...
Yep.
I note that it's, it says on the sheet, the van has over 90,000 miles and it's in poor mechanical condition. If you could just describe any issues that the facilities division has faced with this and just the general overall condition. Is it being used or is it off the road?
It's not being used right now, and the conditions are, over the years, you run into body work that has to be happened, transmission issues. It's had new brakes again, but it's really at the point where there's no good dollars left to put into it. It's just not worth it.
So did we buy this, was this bought by us, or was it hand-me-down?
No, this was bought by us brand new. Yeah. The van? It was an electrician's van. What happened, just to give you some insight, is the sewer division and had bought a truck, a van, 2500 series. We were buying 15s. They were a little light for electricians and plumbers because you're carrying a lot of stuff in it. And the van that they bought was not serving the purpose. It was too small. So we repurposed that over and then got this off the road because it was really not roadworthy anymore. The pickup, more flexible. We use 2 summer hires in the summer to help out with the removal of trash in all the fields at the 2 beaches, and throwing bags in the back of the van wasn't too good either. It just doesn't work well.
I think to point out, too, to have another vehicle to plow would be very helpful.
So it won't be another van, it'll be a pickup truck?
Correct.
This pickup, is it a one-ton pickup, or?
All 2,500 series. That's what we usually buy. No, it's the one.
So it's
Three-quarter.
three-quarter ton
Yes.
with a plow package?
Yes.
Okay. I'm assuming gas versus diesel, right?
Yes.
And the next project is the Cromer Athletics Field Striper and Groomer.
The Cromer, I know, has not been on capital, and we'll just fill you in. The Cromer is a machine that was bought in 2004, it was a recommendation from vendors that take care of fields, and I'm not talking about turf, I'm talking about regular ball fields. The Chroma is a machine that will groom the field, you can line the field, you can run your net behind it to
To drag the field.
drag the field at the end. And when I bought the first Chroma in 2004, it was about $17,000, and it has 1,900 hours on it, which are quite a bit for a machine like that. And we've started to move over the last 3 years from regular repairs to extensive repairs. And it's about at the end of its life and really should be replaced. And it goes to our whole field maintenance, and the loss of it would really push it back.
So this is a piece of equipment that we've been watching and tracking for the last 5 years, and it's never met the $25,000 threshold. And over time, we've been putting more and more money into repairing it. And the difference is it comes with a grooming package where you could have attachments that help line the fields and have a sprayer on the back where we can spray fertilization or chemicals. And having this extra equipment also makes it a complete package to help groom the fields.
Like a gator with the attach on the back, is that kind of what?
Yeah, it's a
envision
small
of it?
little machine, it's a
It's-
paint machine, its primary purpose is to paint the field stripe on.
And just to, so is how that's used spring, summer, fall?
That's it. And for all the grass fields, it's for JV and varsity to stripe soccer, field hockey, lacrosse,
So it's used
football.
South
Very
well, all
frequently.
the
It
fields.
really is, yeah.
So I'm assuming you transport it on a trailer or something between the fields?
When we're going to South Well and stuff, when we're at the high school, we can go from, the high school to Parker and that whole
Driving
loop
over.
That
without.
complex?
Yeah, yep. Okay, and the last one is the roof of this building. I don't think it really needs any introduction. It's been on the Capitol for 11 years. It's been moved 3 times already. It really cannot be moved anymore. It is a big project. There's 4 different roof lines on here. A couple of the roofs have more than 2 layers, which they shouldn't, but for some reason it was done over the years. Can't tell you why. A lot of removal. There is asbestos in the lower level, which is not a big deal on roofs. It's just a special way to handle it. It's not friable like you get from other types, but it has to be dealt with. And really feel we need to get the money for this one and just get it done and button this building up tight.
Gary and Kathleen, can you explain the damage we had this year and what we had to do? Because I think it gives an indication of what's going on in this building.
What happened was a big windstorm we had uplifted the corner of the high roof here. And when it lifts the corner, it tears into the roof. And we had to do, I want to say it was $12,000 worth of repairs just to put it back. And we did it in that fashion versus, so we let them screw things down, caulk over it, and then fix all the seams. The lower roof to the gym itself, which is amazing that it never leaks, thank God for the beautiful floor below it. But we've been on borrowed time with that one for a while.
We also had buckets in the assessor's office.
Yeah, for a while.
Thank you, I was gonna,
Yeah.
thank you, I was gonna ask about that, because I was gonna say, being someone that works in the building, the first floor I know had water damage last year.
So,
And I think it's big money, but the thing is, it's a school roof. I mean, the way you kind of think
It's
of
a
it,
big
this is a school building. This was a high school
I don't save
building.
on buckets, though.
No, but it's,
yeah, so.
could you just think of the different layers of roof on this building? It's
Yeah.
like any other school building.
And I think you're aware, we have a roof track program that we've had for years. We started it with Maya, our insurance company, a local company, ARM. And you push off based on what you have. And I mean, we had roofs like the school admin that got done just recently, last year, which we're doing in the spring, is the senior center. So I mean, and we moved those, so now we're at the point where the moving of this is just not.
So the senior center hasn't been completed yet?
No, it's already had the paperwork all taken care of for it. We got the bids ready, and it'll be ready to go as soon as the weather changes. But that's all been financed and ready.
What's the estimated life expectancy?
On this,
Yeah,
25 to 30 easily. It's all rubber.
okay.
Yeah.
On the replacement roof?
Yeah, most of them will last longer than that if you're, what really ruins your roofs, especially the flat ones, is the more you're on it. Because there's more traffic, opening up units. There's really no HVAC on the upper roof, there's none on the gym, so good portions of this, and unless you're going out twice a year to clean the drains, which we do, to make sure they're not full of leaves, you really shouldn't have much traffic on them.
Thank you. If anybody, no further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary and Kathleen. That completes municipal facilities. Next on the agenda are school facilities, which are projects 17 through 23. We have the school management team here this morning. We have Dr. Jay Lang, Superintendent, Joanna Johnson Collins, Linda Hirsch, Assistant Superintendent, and Bill Silva, Director of Technology. Good morning, Dr. Lang.
Backup pieces after as well. Thank you, good morning, everyone. Just wanted to share, before we get into the project detail, a little bit, thanks, Gary, a little bit of kind of an overview of where we are as far as the capital planning and the work that the school committee's done over the last year or so to get where we are today. So if you recall, about 2 years ago at this point, the school committee and the school administration had gone out and hired a company to come in and actually work on a comprehensive facility assessment with us of all of our school buildings. That was the Dora and Whittier study. So if you hear me mention that, that's where that came from. But they had come in and done a long-term facility, or a current facility assessment of all of our school buildings and helped us try to prioritize projects that needed to be performed over the coming years. So over the course of the last year, Gary, Kathleen, Brian Curley in the schools, and myself reviewed the Dora and Whittier study and actually went through and took a look at the different phases of it. So we first went through the study and pulled out anything that had already been completed. So there were some projects that were already in the works capital-wide, so we identified those as being completed. There were also a number of projects, and some pretty significant projects within that study that wouldn't be performed or not recommended to be performed unless there were actually a new school building project. So a lot of the work that was in the study, that was identified in the study, that had a pretty significant price tag, dealt with asbestos abatement in the schools. But you wouldn't actually abate a lot of the spaces in the schools for asbestos unless you were actually taking down a whole school or you were doing a new school. So we isolated out those projects, and we're not recommending moving forward with them now unless we would actually entertain a larger project. On a positive, we would have what some estimates would be to remedy the issues if we ever did a larger project, but we wanted to kind of call those out so that they weren't inflating the numbers where they didn't have to be. There was the next category of projects that was pretty significant as well, that all dealt with building envelope type issues. Air infiltration, ceiling cracks in schools, things along those lines. And we saw some pretty consistent themes from school to school, but there were multiple, when you pulled them all together, millions of dollars worth of recommendations that dealt with building envelope issues. We pulled all of those building envelope recommendations out, and we're actually dealing with that separately right now. We're going to be looking at possibly putting an RFP out to have an engineering type firm take a look at those recommendations, see if they're all recommended to move forward, if there are ways to group those over the coming years to find some cost efficiencies, instead of having a company come in and do a little project at Harrington School. You know, does it make sense to do that particular project at all? 4 elementary schools, things along those lines. So the building envelope work has been pulled out. We're looking at that kind of running parallel to all of this. We then took the remaining projects that were in the study and broke them up into high, medium, and low needs. And basically, we just use that to signify whether something should be performed over the first 1 to 3 years, years 4 to 6, or years 7 to 10. And we do have a prioritized 10-year list of capital items. We then took that 10-year list and realizing that the town has a pretty steady amount of money that it uses each year for capital, we didn't want to have one year where we're coming in with a huge spike in funding requests and not the next year. So the first first 5 years of the plan or so, the school requests are between $1.5 million and $2 million in that range. There are some pretty significant projects in the outlier years, 5 to 10, that add up to close to about $3 million per year. That's something that we're obviously talking about internally. That's something that the town finance team and us will talk about as well. When we have a tri-board meeting, we might start to talk about that. Just longer-term planning as far as the town is concerned. We've just got a lot of competing interests. There's a lot of capital needs. And it's going to be very difficult to fit all of those needs into, say, the $3 million or so that the town typically budgets for capital. But as we went through that 5-year plan, I know for the purposes of this particular committee, we look at a 5-year out, so I do have the 10-year plan, but we basically just provided the 5-year plan. And within that 5-year plan, again, the critical needs that were identified primarily in year 1 and a little bit leaked into year 2 were things that were identified in the Doran-Whittier study as what they considered top priority, life safety, sanitary type issues that really had to be addressed immediately. So that is what we're looking at today, particularly in year 1. Now, aside from this sorting of projects that are before you today, the school committee over the course of a few meetings has talked about these projects, and then in their opinion has also gone in and given some recommendations about what they feel from the school side priorities are. And we share that with you, and we can certainly talk them through as we go. And they don't go in order of what you have before you today, so we're just going to stay in the order of what's in front of you today and start with Project 17. So Project 17 is actually what we term school kitchen code compliance upgrades. So when we go through all of our schools, and again, I should back up for 1 second. In the more detailed spreadsheet that you have behind the project, it actually goes kind of school by school, project by project. For the purposes of presenting the information for similar type projects, we lumped the projects together to come up with the dollar amount. Say for the school kitchen upgrade project, you have the $285. That's actually a little bit of work at, say, all 4 elementary schools, but for the purposes of presentation, that's why we presented that this evening. But on this particular project, over the years, our town health inspectors, as well as through this Doran-Whittier study, identified some code compliant issues within the kitchen. And we're seeking $285,644 in year 1 to remedy those. A lot of what you will find is in kitchens, we have a lot of butcher blocks still in the food preparation and serving areas, and you're really not supposed to have butcher block in a commercial kitchen or a serving kitchen. So that should be changed over to stainless steel, whether it's permanent or it's mobile units. There were some code compliant ceilings that keep getting referenced within the different inspections that occur. We don't, in several of the schools, have washable ceilings. They're more of like a cement type ceiling, but they were actually really recommend in kitchens more of a drop ceiling with washable tiles, just in case you get food or residue up in the ceiling so that they can be cleaned. To replace an existing exhaust hood with a code compliant exhaust hood. Remove an obsolete dish room to be able to provide some code compliant storage in one of our schools. Our schools now don't have a lot of storage within the kitchen. And they used to in schools actually wash dishes and things like that, or the serving trays for the kids. We don't do that any longer. So the schools have made use of the old dish rooms for storage. But you technically still have all the piping and everything run to those buildings. And so the code inspectors, when they come in, flag that as a code issue. You're not supposed to use that as a storage area in the buildings. And then in several of the schools in the serving lines, they're recommending installing code-compliant sneeze shields in the lines. And then we also have in a number of the kitchens pot sinks and hand-washing sinks that are kind of common sinks. So you're really supposed to have employees be washing their hands at a totally separate sink than the sinks that are used for cleaning and preparing pots and pans and things along those lines. So that is project number 1. Again, there are 2 different projects for the kitchens. This is really to address all of the code compliance issues that have been recommended. And then later on during the program, we actually do have some upgrades to the kitchens themselves that are recommended, but that is separate from what you have before you today.
So just real quickly, you're not doing any food preparation at the elementary level, correct?
Very minimal at this point, and when we get into the larger discussion about like kitchen upgrades, we're really looking over the next 10 years to have the high school and the 2 middle schools be kind of cooking and preparation type kitchens. The high school's actually used as a commissary right now to produce the food that then gets sent out to the elementary schools. So they do very little true cooking in those schools, but they do have to, take the food out of the containers that come from the other schools, help prep it, and display it, and then serve it. But they don't do kind of traditional cooking, maybe some heating up of items, but no real cooking. So we haven't put kitchen upgrades in at the elementary school level, with the exception of some upgrades to the serving line that the kids go through. We have butcher block combination serving stations. We have some serving wells that are actually non-functioning. So on a serving line, you might have like some cold wells that are supposed to keep things cold that may be broken. You have some that are supposed to keep things to a temp or a constant temp that may not be working properly. So the only thing we're recommending upgrading at the elementary level are the serving lines, not to make them fully functioning kitchens. And I don't see that changing really over the next 10 years. So as we were looking at the plan, that's how we approach that.
Thank you.
I have a point, I don't know, I'm gonna make it now, and only once. As I look down, like, just for Project 17, and I'm gonna speak about the Westland School. So what I know is that you have approximately $1 million in your community education fund that you have to spend down. So what I would suggest strongly is that you take a kind of a cold eye at the things for the Westland School and see those things that might be appropriate to pay out of that, because as you know, and you said it yourself, there's a limited amount of capital resources, and I'm not suggesting that like an entire
Right.
kitchen upgrade, but I'm just saying that there are probably, in my mind, line items, and I'm like drawn to one here that's for $25,000. It's install, at the Westlands, install a code compliant separation between the commercial food service and the community-based teaching kitchen. So I mean, that seems like that is something that's very specific to a program that also applies to community education. So all I'm suggesting is, given the circumstances that we have, like, 2 arms lengths worth of
Right.
needs, and you do have the $1 million, that some small items could be taken off that list and spent from that money.
No, I agree, and I hear you. We actually have, like, when it came to some technology upgrades within the building, or like, say, PA upgrades within the building, things that we can actually tie and really attribute to the whole building, we've done that. A lot of these items on the list that still relate to Westlands are really more to support the preschool program, the CHIPS program, not community education. So, like, the particular items on here, kitchen-related, are really to support the district's preschool program, not community education. And we're walking that fine line because we don't want to get tagged with using ComEd funds to really support the CHIPS program at the school. So, but I do look at that whenever we can. I mean, it's a
Okay,
valid point, and I appreciate you
I-
bringing that up.
I'm not asking you to blur lines at all. I'm just
Right.
saying, if there's a way to utilize that money, I think it should be tapped first. And then also, you do have a significant amount of money in your school choice fund, too, that can be used for educational things. So I think that I'd like to see an aggressive use of that, is my perspective.
Oh, and I appreciate that, and we've talked about that over the years, I really do try.
I know I've
when
mentioned it
we-
a couple of times, but.
Just a
so
couple,
That's
but
why,
we do
that's why I
try
said I'm
to,
only gonna
to
mention
do
it
that.
once today.
But under 18, they marked a Project 18, that would be a good use. It is an all-school expenditure. It's $15,000 for the hot water convector, and that's all school. That's a good use for that.
Yes.
That's perfect.
So, thank you.
Okay, no further questions, we can go on to 18.
Sure. 18 deals with HVAC ductwork repair and servicing. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention, I do have some pictures of all these different kind of issues in the schools, even when it came to like the code compliant kitchens or like ductwork pictures that I can project for you if you wanted to. So I'm absolutely happy to do that, but I didn't want to stall the presentation either if you were aware of it or didn't want to. But if you want to see any of these projects, I do have more detailed pictures to share with you. So in this particular project, funding is sought to service some of the existing ductwork and air handling distribution units at, again, primarily elementary schools, Byham, Harrington, and Westlands. Hot water convector unit being replaced at Westlands, and at the high school, RTU 18 needs to have a new burial frequency drive attached to it. Again, these, some of this, obviously, when they're doing this work, we will clean the ductwork that's there. But a lot of this is more extensive than just like a traditional maintenance type item. I know we're also cautious about not putting just strictly kind of service or maintenance items on the capital plan. But a lot of this isn't like traditional cleaning of like a univent or changing out a filter, things along those lines. A lot of this is more extensive, kind of really getting up into ducts, making repairs. Obviously, where you're up there servicing it, you'll clean it at the same time. But this happens over 3 different schools. Most of this ductwork is in the kitchen and the cafeteria area where the kids are eating, breakfast and lunch at those schools.
Would you say that, to Kathy's point, that the existing ductwork and air distribution at Westlands and the hot water convector units would be uses that could be taken out of that fund? They're all school uses.
Yeah, that's something, honestly, on that particular item, we'd have to go back to the school committee and get their opinion on. They are building-wide issues, and again, it becomes, how do you apportion, what is really community education from the CHIPS program and supporting that in school and coming up with some kind of equitable formula so that you wouldn't be opening yourself to anyone coming in and saying you're basically utilizing community education funds to subsidize the operation of the school itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go back to the point that some of the money that goes into community education is gleaned from services in the other buildings. The after-school program, the preschool program, if you drop your child off in the morning, that money goes, just drop them off at the center school, drop them off at Byham or wherever, that money does go to that program, right?
There's one central fund.
Yeah, right, so I mean.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, so they're utilizing the 4 buildings, and I know that you, I know you do put, an allocation back for the utilities and all that. I know you do, but what I'm saying is that program does utilize multiple buildings,
Yes, I see what you're saying.
and so therefore,
There has to be some kind of a formula that
Right.
exists there, so we can do a formula here as well.
yeah.
Well,
We have-
and
we
the
have
same
smart
with like
people.
the cleaning and the maintenance of the building. We do a formula to basically
Yeah.
charge that back already. You just have to see what's reasonable and not have it be
Yep.
No,
kind of
I understand.
so
and
overarching.
I promise I
Right.
won't mention it again.
No, it's not, it's,
It only
like I
lasted
said,
3
it's worth
minutes.
mentioning. We have talked about it.
Okay, sorry.
Question, have you done any air sampling, air quality sampling in these areas to see if there's any unsafe conditions because of the ducts?
Air quality sampling was probably last done when we did the ESCO, which would have been close to 4 years ago now. When you do a performance contract, the 2 things that you have to deal with and know that you're dealing with is what's going to fit and what's not going to fit. And that's one of the reasons why, and you're going to find in all the elementary schools, the units for the gyms and the cafeterias remain the same. There's not a lot of savings to a change-out. So, of course, they don't make it into an ESCO because the whole reason for doing one is if you spend $18 million, you're supposed to get that $18 million back over the years, which for the first 3 years we've been doing very nicely with a little kicker at the end of, 13 to 20,000. So that's working, but that's the reason why some of that was left out. I guess the best example I could give is, back in 2005 and 6, when we had the 31 million and we're doing the renovations, that same thing came up for all the high school ductwork because it was interior lined. And the cost to change the ductwork was just unbelievable and would have tossed the project into a whole nother area that couldn't have been afforded. So what happened is we went in, you go in and why I'm saying that is because the same thing with this stuff, as Dr. Lane said, there's areas of this that are serviced every year. Your filters are done, your grills are done, and there's compartments that are cut out and serviceable per the manufacturer. Then longer runs of ductwork are not, and that's the same thing that happened at the high school. So what we did is we ripped out all the lining, you run a robot down there, you clean all the ductwork, and then in this case, we sealed it because we didn't want any residue from, the taking out of the interior line duct, which was a 1970 to probably 74 thing that they started to do to quiet down buildings, then found out that it's not good because it can get wet. And so anyway, to make a long story short, you cut areas into the ductwork, you service those, you run your camera through to the end. When you're sure you're done, you seal all those back up. And that's basically the amount of work that will be done in the shorter runs than the high school had, but that's what would have to be done to this equipment to really bring it up. But besides that, up until about a year and a half ago, when a machine that we bought years ago, which does complete building analysis by Acuity, which is now not supported anymore, they've dropped the line. We did our own air quality testing through the years, and we have all those results and have not had any issues.
So there have not been any issues found, is what you said, right?
Yes,
Okay.
from that, no.
This is just like an example picture. So one of the particular ductwork at one of the schools, you can see obviously if we were going to go in and do any repairs, we would clean it at the same time. But like some of the seam work is starting to separate. So someone needs to go in and, kind of make adjustments to those ducts. But again, you would clean it at the same time you were doing that.
Okay, so there's no questions. We'll move on to Project 19.
Project 19, and just a couple little pictures in there, but as you walk through the schools, oftentimes you'll have, just because of the age of the buildings, or this happened to be a piece of floor that was in a corridor in one of the modulars at McCarthy, pieces of the VC tile will chip away and break. This particular tile, and most of the tile that we've seen in these particular schools, we finally, again, kind of hit a threshold where we're over $25,000 in total. We don't have a regular operating budget to be able to do this kind of work every year. So when we lumped a couple of the projects together, this is where this came from. But again, this would not be doing wholesale, like replacement of tile in classrooms, but in areas within these buildings where some of the VCT tile has been significantly compromised and chipped up, just to go in and patch. So basically to take out existing tile and do these repairs.
Okay, so no questions. We'll go on to Project 20.
Yeah, Project 20, so this is different than code compliance. These are just some recommended upgrades over the course of the next number of years in the school kitchens for serving purposes. So again, we mentioned our strategy district-wide is really to have the high school, the Parker and the McCarthy schools be fully functioning, really well operated serving kitchens. So they're going to prepare food there, they're going to serve food there. So you will see numbers in the outlying years for the high school, McCarthy and Parker, to have their kitchens be totally upgraded. But at the elementary school level, again, over the course of the next 10 years, we really don't see it changing to having them be production kitchens. They'll just be more serving kitchens. The only thing that we're recommending doing there are some upgrades to the serving lines for the kids to go through. Again, just so that the serving lines are properly working and functioning, making it a little bit more optimal for the little kids as they go through the line to get their meals. So the Byam, Harrington, and South Row, the year one costs were just a little over $100,000. But we did want to at least kind of put it on the radar, because these were in some of the previous capital plans, but in different configuration as far as the number of years fell. That we would a year from now be looking to do Parker, Westlands, McCarthy, and then Chelmsford High School was the big one in 2024.
I just have a curiosity question. Do you know what percentage of elementary school kids buy hot lunch as opposed to bringing?
Not off the top of my head. Joanna, would you?
Overall, for the district, we're at like 34%, but it's higher at the elementary and lower at the high school.
So,
So we only have district-wide off the top of our head. We can get you school by school if you'd like, but it was 34% district-wide
buy hot
buy.
lunch.
But there are more kids at the elementary level than at the high school level that buy.
Okay.
So it's the numbers are probably a little bit higher at the elementary. We can follow up and give you that.
I'm just curious.
Okay, so
Okay?
The question on this, you got in the detail, what's really the difference between 17 and 20?
The code versus the.
Project 17 are really code compliance.
Okay. Because in 20, you also have in the detail, code compliance.
The flooring. So in 17, it's all dealing with, again, like say the dual sink type issue, things along those lines. When we replace flooring in the schools, right now, like in a kitchen, they would want you to put in either like those, I forget the name of them, like those 9x9, like those red tiles that you see that are like slip resistant type flooring. We right now have, like say VCT, things like that, that if it gets wet, it can be a little slippery. So if we're gonna replace a floor, we would put a non-slip floor surface. That wasn't code compliance with regard to like serving food, like a health type thing. Cutting on a butcher block, where you could actually have like contamination and things like that, is what was really identified in 17. So this would be more like if you were gonna do a full upgrade of a kitchen, what you would do. That doesn't come into play in any of the years in 20. That would come into play if you actually did like a total, like Parker, McCarthy, or high school in the next number of years. If we actually ripped up those floors and redid the floors, when you'd put those in. Quarry tiles, what they call them, sorry.
Okay, so the outlying years where you've got the larger budget requests, those are essentially gutting.
Full-blown gutting and remodels.
Got the total kitchen.
Right. Well, let me back up for a second. At Parker, I know that it involves floor as well. In Parker, it's also the ceiling, because they just have a cement ceiling, they don't have a washable ceiling. At McCarthy, when we get to that particular year, they already have a washable ceiling, so like the ceiling wouldn't be included there. And I do actually believe the McCarthy, off the top of my head, their flooring is, I think it might be a quarry tile already, so I don't think that one actually has to be done. But you would get a more detailed look in those particular years when those came forward.
Yeah, it just feels like there's some overlap between some of these requests and the code compliance in 17. So,
Yeah, the only thing, like I said, it's probably in the Parker year 21, it would just be the flooring at Parker, that if we put a new floor in, we'd make sure it was code compliant.
so if we do everything in item 17, when we look at item 20, are we having to throw anything out? that we
Nothing,
did
it's
read or
not, there's
redo?
nothing duplicative.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so just make sure that we don't, fund something, ceiling tiles, and then in a kitchen renovation, we rip out the ceiling tiles.
Oh, no, we wouldn't do that.
We wouldn't be
Right,
doing
no.
that. Okay.
No. Okay. Project 21 is parking lot expansion, and this actually, we're going to talk about parking lots a little bit in 21 and 23, but in 21 it relates to the Harrington. So when we finished the modular classroom construction project a summer ago, or a year and a half ago, we had wanted to include some upgrades and some additional parking at 3 of the elementary schools, the Byam, the Harrington, and Center, because of the traffic flow and the need for additional spaces. Byam's, when that project was done, went out to bid. It was part of the whole modular project, so that was done at that time. We then had remaining funding, which we thought was going to be enough to cover both the Harrington and the Center at the time. Gary worked with a firm to put bid specs together for us. We went out to bid last spring to have those projects completed, but the low bid actually did come in under budget, but it was thrown out. There was an error in the bid that was submitted. They didn't spec out a particular part of the project. The next low bidder was above the amount of money that we had for the project. So we basically, in looking at the numbers, we have sufficient funding within the modular project to be able to pay for one of the 2 parking lots to be done. The more critical, in our opinion, was to have the center parking lot done. So we're going to move forward with the bidding and have the modular money cover the center parking lot. But the Harrington parking lot is then, that's why this is on the list now. This was not previously on the list. This jumped onto the list really because we didn't have the funding at the modular project to be able to do this. I do.
Actually, Jay, if you don't mind for
Go ahead.
1 second. The parking lot, additional parking for the Harrington has been on the list. It was on the list in the Don Yeoman days. The proposal back then for about 240 or 260,000 was to take that whole rear lot between the high school and the Harrington, build it out 2 layers, steps, and then
Yeah.
1/2 would be for the high school, 1/2 would be for the Harrington, and then if someone had a big event, you could take over the whole thing. It got pulled off of capital in the 18th hour one year after it did get voted, close to it. At least by the school committee it was. And then, as you know, we did the ESCO and used a half of that lot for the solar, leaving the other half again, hopefully for parking. And then when the modular project came, we had to take that existing part of the lot that we would have built on and turn that into the new playground so the modulars can go where the playground is. So, yes, it's a first year coming this way. I'm not going to tell you no, but it's been on the plan before to add that capital and really should have been done way back when, 2 superintendents ago, that's all I'll say.
It is. If you look, it's a mess over there as far as just the cars kind of parking everywhere. So you can see in the different pictures. This is, kind of during, stop of the school year. The cars are parked on, both sides of the street. They go and parking down near the synagogue on the way to the,
Yeah, so there's a shot of Richardson Road.
will you narrate for us, John?
Sure.
Easy, okay. They're double parking even in front of the modulars. They're taking good advantage of all the space that's there. But, you would see some cars kind of parking on corners and things like that just to make space. So the plan actually that Gary put together is a great one. It cuts out that center island, or a chunk down the center island, to basically be able to accommodate cars kind of head in on both ways. Very similar to kind of what happened at the Byam, which has been wonderful. That's really worked out very well for them parking-wise at the Byam Elementary School.
So how many spaces would you be adding approximately?
I believe it was about 31.
Wow, that's
I'd have to look again, I'm not sure.
great.
There's 2 lots that I've been dealing with. The center
I
has,
get the center confused.
the center has the center has a circular now. For some reason, they only did about 2/3 of it, and never finished it. So it's to finish that and then go to their front and cut out a big chunk and do sort of the same thing, but in a different fashion. So honestly, I'll give you that number if you want it. I have both.
Okay, it's in that range.
It's over 22, 24 anyway, minimum, I would say,
Okay.
to the lowest lot.
Okay. Project 22 is before you, and if you look in the outlier years of some of the 10-year capital plan, we do have some anticipated clock issues in other schools. We went through and we upgraded all the PA systems in our buildings over the last 2 years. That project went really well. The clock system at Center Elementary School was basically just the first one to die. It's on its last leg. The clock's not the same room to room. It's very difficult when you're trying to schedule and kind of coordinate a school, and all the clocks are on different times. So this was one that was kind of limping along. It's an obsolete system. It's very difficult to get parts to keep it going. But the center was just the first one that went. So we had to jump that to the top of the list to try to get it go. But in years to come, I think it's in the outlier years 5 to 10, we did factor in additional clock systems or clock upgrades in the other buildings. So there is more to come on that. But Centers has failed us at this point. Project 23 is the second phase that was begun last year with the high school parking lot. So we'd received funding last year. Well, no, I guess it's in the current year, right?
Yep.
To do the high school parking lot over. Just this past summer, if you start at the street up at Harrington, the entrance, all the way down behind the back of the high school, the student lot near the athletic field, out in front of the Performing Arts Center, all the way to behind the Performing Arts Center, leading up to the access road that goes back to the main building, was all redone. So it was all ground up, all new hot top, new curbing. It really looks good. Gary and his crew and the contractors did a very nice job. It was a large project, though, so we tried to split the funding up over 2 years. So the second half of the funding is basically to come back and do the same thing at the front of the high school. So again, it would take out all of the existing hot top, put in new curbing, handicap accessible curb cuts, all those kind of things, and then restripe the front lot. And that little access road that kind of starts in the front lot and goes back down to have a join at the back of the pack.
And your priority list is the Harrington, if you had to choose, the Harrington is first?
We did. We had a long talk about that, and I think just because they don't even have the spaces at the Harrington to repair. So at the high school, at least they do have a driveway, they do have parking out in front, but at Harrington, they don't have that. And with the little kids and having cars parked just everywhere, it's a mess in that parking lot. So it was more of a safety issue at the Harrington to try to add the spots there. We certainly want to do the high school as well, but where they didn't even have one at Harrington, that was the priority to get that done first, and then do the high school.
So a question, I mean, in looking at last year's request, for the whole project, it was 1.4 million. 1,062,000 was funded. So you're asking for another 500,000. So that means that there's a substantial increase in the total project cost to complete the project?
You're talking about for the $500,000?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's factors that play into that all the time. We have to look at, of course, at the same time at our amount of workload, because as you know, when we came here, the real lot was 1.4 million alone originally, and the front was a little over 500,000 if we didn't do anything, meaning DPW. So we did all the tear up of everything. We moved all the stuff, did all the prep for every sidewalk that went in, and we did all the drainage, and then turned over, putting in the granite curbing, doing all the reclaiming of the pavement and all of that by others. So again, we're trying to get a balance to it. And then my other issue is you've lost another year, which means you've deteriorated more. Now, if we skip it one, we will again. Not that it's not drivable. It's a heck of a lot better than the back ever was. And, we'll make minor repairs if we have to this year, if it's not funded, to get to the following year. But I don't see it exceeding that, no. But there's considerable work to be done.
To Gary's point, the little bit the million last year, was DPW doing a lot of that work. So there was a significant chunk that they did. The contractor obviously had a contract to perform, but there's almost, not soft costs, but like costs that are just within DPW for using their staff to do a lot of this work that aren't reflected in that 1,042,000 or whatever that particular number was. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Would have been a lot higher.
Okay, so if that's no more questions, that completes, complete school facilities. If you'd like, although municipal technology is next on the agenda, just since you're here, if you'd like to, you and Bill, or you would like to present Project 24 on school technology, we'll welcome you.
I'm fine if you don't mind.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay with you guys?
Sure.
So on this one, there's only one technology project for you this year that deals with school security. But I did want to just touch briefly to give you an update on some of the network infrastructure projects that were before this board previously, just because they were originally on one of the cut sheets to have multiple years. We're going to be doing technology upgrades with the infrastructure in the buildings. And I think the first year we were able to do Parker Middle School. This past summer we were able to do a couple of the schools. And over the next 2 years we were going to come back and finish those out. Bill was able to apply for a grant with DOE. I forget the exact dollar amount. It was about 600,000.
Yeah, about 630.
630, to actually get a grant from the DOE to be able to fast track and perform those last upgrades at the remaining elementary schools and then also Chelmsford High School. So we actually, I know we talked extensively about that over the last couple of years. I didn't want you to think that we either stopped the project or didn't complete the project, but we were able to utilize the town capital funding, some E-rate funding, and then also the grant that Bill received to be able to actually, this past summer and through the fall, upgrade all of the infrastructure within the school buildings. So that either, has been completed or is being wrapped up right now. Because I know we had talked about that over the last couple of years. So that was actually kind of a good news story.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job.
We had wanted to obviously upgrade some of the internal infrastructure within the buildings to then be able to take on some additional security measures within the schools. We have very good perimeter access cameras of all of our school buildings now, and at the high school on the interior side, we've got very good camera access there as well. At our elementary and middle schools, we do have camera access just in the main lobby of those schools. We don't have camera access throughout the buildings K-8. We only have that at the high school level. So one of the charges over this past year as well is the district has spent a significant amount of time doing assessments of our schools, looking at security systems on a more practical, physical level. We upgraded some of our response protocols within the district from more traditional kind of lockdown during active shooter situations and things like that to an options-based response. We've spent a lot of time looking at that. And one component that we're able to take a look at and also hopefully fast-track a little bit is some upgrades to the security systems, again, within the buildings. So Bill has had a number of different vendors take a look at our existing system. The existing system that we use is remaining. We're not looking to change our system that we currently use. But they've actually worked to kind of go inside the buildings, map them out, figure out, where cameras should go. From our end also, not just cameras, but actually, one of the kind of safety threats that we look at is, say, open doors. We wanted to be able to add like a door monitoring piece so that if a door is left ajar, it would send a little message to the system to let us know we have a door open. If a kid were ever to peg a door to be able to like let a friend in later or whatnot, we want to have like forced door alarms and things like that. There is some integration with, silent or panic alarms that can tie into the police department, again, in the event of any kind of an issue within the buildings. But Bill had put together a kind of a comprehensive plan to take a look at all these different security upgrades in the schools. The school committee is going to be looking at this as well over the coming weeks and months. But the total cost for the proposals that we're looking at, obviously it would go out to bid before we were to implement it. We're all coming in about $1.5 million. So we tried to take a look and see how could we actually do this and do it in an orderly fashion so that we didn't come forward with $1.5 million request all at one time. We had planned originally to be able to first address the upgrades at the middle schools. Again, exterior, we have good camera coverage. High school, we have interior camera coverage. Obviously, there's some we want to tweak, replace, and add. But we want to first add cameras on the interior of the 2 middle schools. So that's why in year 1 in fiscal '20, we would attack the Parker and the McCarthy middle schools with the funding. Just a forecast for you, in year 2, we would basically go back and button up the high school. Again, change out some of the cameras that need to be upgraded, add a few cameras in strategic places where it's been identified as being warranted. But also, again, there's more of like your door alarms and things along those lines. And then in year 3 of the plan, what would come before you, it didn't print out on the cut sheet, but there was another line for fiscal '22. That's the 4 elementary schools. So it's basically doing middle schools in year 1, high school in year 2, and then elementary schools in year 3.
Any questions on the security camera, security upgrade project?
Not on that. Well, where is it? Sorry, the central administration office, $11,093.
Mhm.
You have the duplicate request under police station dispatch. The police didn't ask for anything in their capital. They didn't show up. Why are we, as a school department, asking for capital expenditures for the police station? That should come out of the town side, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I did that, to be honest with you, because, and again, in conversations, if that's something that we don't want to install, or there's a question about whether there might be some functionality there at the police department now if they don't need it, we were just looking at putting together like a complete package for the town. We obviously work very closely with the police department. They monitor and work with us on the security cameras. The vast majority of this funding is actually school-based and in the schools. We also wanted to have this additional functionality, which costs about $12,000 at central office in the event that there was ever an issue in one of the schools, for us to be able to really kind of closely monitor the action. And we wanted to build in that functionality also for the police department to be able to have. You know, the $12,000 in the scheme of the $1.5 million is relatively a small number. If
I'm just looking at it as a process goes.
I looked at it for more just consistency type sake, but you know, if the police either do not need or do not desire to have the $12,000 for that, we could take that out.
I just want to ask this question from like paring the number down perspective. That, you know, $500,000 is a lot. So could you do less of an implementation? Could you phase it in even more, or?
Here's what I struggle with. And again, we've had this discussion with the school committee as well. School security is a huge issue right now. You know, security of public buildings and hospitals, and security is kind of on everyone's mind. When we took a look at this particular programming, I think so I've actually heard people say, well, why aren't you just doing the whole $1.5 million at once? Why isn't this just, you know, we're going to do all of our schools at the same time? And we're trying to take a measured approach and make sure that the technology we're putting in and these integrated systems are really working well and they can function properly in the schools. We said it would make sense when we have 2 middle schools, if we have to divide this out over the 3 years, if we have 2 middle schools, then we would want both middle schools to have parity and equity. And as the kids get older is when we want to have more accessibility to footage within buildings. So in year 1, where the high school already has interior camera footage, in year 1, let's do the 2 middle schools. That was part of our original plan to get them up to speed. Don't pick Parker over McCarthy and McCarthy over Parker, but let's do both at the same time. In year 2, come back and kind of button up the high school, any of the little deficiencies or missing pieces there. Again, they already have a pretty solid system, but just fill in some of the blanks at the high school. And then in year 3, come and hit the 4 elementary schools all at the same time. I honestly couldn't come before you and say I would prioritize one elementary school over another elementary school, and I think that would get very
Dicey.
well, difficult, right? Particularly, God forbid, something ever happened in the school you didn't pick to do the upgrade in. So when we're looking at this and trying to find some parity and equity in the implementation, this was the rationale that we felt was best and manageable financially.
Thank you.
You'd indicated that there was this consultant brought in that did a complete study with the recommendations that back up these numbers?
No, firms, like vendors that sell this equipment. Bill works with vendors to like have them come in and provide proposals and quotes and spec out services and things along those lines.
But was there a firm that was brought in to do a total security assessment for the schools? Or how did you spec out what you wanted? Because I'm looking, last year, for example, we had a $45,000 request.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had, I think, requests in the past for security cameras. So we've been spending some amount of money.
Right.
But we're looking at a large sum of money now is being requested.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we had a company come out that's really well-versed in school and hospital security. That is really their forte. And they put together a comprehensive package. I made a copy for you, because I know you always ask for these types of documents.
I just want to be, this isn't public record, so I just want to be clear,
Yes.
very clear about this, because like we're going to meet in executive session with the school committee over a number of months to kind of plan the implementation of things. That's what I struggle with, quite honestly, is the.
I know, at this forum, we can't do that because we don't really have an executive session
Right.
to be able to talk
posted,
about
right.
this
Yeah.
type of detail.
Yeah, when it comes to like the deployment or, putting out of devices, I'm wondering if, and I have no problem showing you like quotes and proposals and things like this, if it might be better to, like individually, if you wanted to come into our office and have a meeting with us and look at it, I have no problem with that.
I mean, John, I don't know, since this, we're really looking at a expenditure of about 1.5 million for security. And there are a lot, as you point out, there are a lot of sensitive
Right.
issues.
That's the only
that-
thing I'm trying to be sensitive.
I concur that we really need to be sensitive to that. So I don't know if we should have some type of executive session to be able to better understand what is being proposed here, because it is a huge jump from requests in the past. And if we embark on this, it's something that we really need to commit for the next few years.
Paul, if I could just ask a question. Is your understanding is security permitted under Chapter 30B? So we could, at the next meeting, we could, as long as we have to post it for November 30th, we could post an executive session.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about the actual information, though? So say this is just a public meeting
Right.
document question. So say we do meet in executive session,
Mhm.
and we review the document, technically, isn't the document then part of our,
It wouldn't get released, though. It would be like minutes from an executive session. You wouldn't
okay,
release
you would
it.
just say,
Right.
the document doesn't have to be
released,
attached.
yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to ask that.
Right. We would hold that as confidential. That there would be an exemption under the open meeting law.
But what you might be able to do in general terms, maybe that's where you're going, is for example, they're going to open a new high school in Billerica next year. What type of security would you see in terms of cameras in those type of buildings? That's probably common knowledge without getting into the specifics of like
Yeah.
Chelmsford. And maybe that's sort of what you're getting. In other words, what is state-of-the-art, system are you putting in general that people would expect to see in a public high school or a middle school, what have you? I think that sort of, I think,
Yeah,
is.
what we could do if you wanted is
Yeah.
maybe put together, because when we have these meetings with the school committee, obviously during their public session, there's gonna be like some slides with some very high-level stuff.
Right.
These are the type of, say, cameras we're putting in. This is the type of, forced door alarms, things like that, without getting into the nitty-gritty about like
Right.
where they're gonna be and how they're gonna be deployed. If you wanted, we could come up with some higher-level, kind of sheets along those lines. Even when it came to like this proposal or the finance within here, this project would still ultimately go out to bid because you'd have multiple vendors who could provide these types of materials. We just wanted to have some solid numbers backing up, X number of cameras, and this is what the implementation is gonna cost. So this isn't even, the vendor necessarily who would do this implementation. This just gives us a good footprint to know that like our numbers are relatively sound, that if we go out to bid and we ask you for this money, that we have at least have a budget to work within.
I mean, I think now we know there are cameras at all the entrances to the schools. I mean, that's
Right.
been the previous investment that the police and the school admin and so forth, there are recorded devices that at every entrance to the schools. That was the first wave of security. And then at the high school, beyond that, there are cameras in the stairwells, some of the corridors and so forth. And I think what my understanding of what this is going, it's sort of going to that comprehensive, assessment of all the buildings in terms of, going into, you'll be able to locate all areas of a facility. I think that's
Yeah, I
the
mean,
best
one
way to
thing I'd say is,
describe
like,
what's going
We would
on.
have like a camera on every door.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have that right now.
In the door
in the
sensors,
school.
yeah.
So all of your entrance and egress points, would have cameras on them in the
It's going to
schools.
require more people to look at, I mean, I'm just thinking about the cameras and, okay,
Yeah.
the camera, someone's going to be looking at it
We,
to assess if there's a situation that needs to be done with the
right,
car.
90%, 90+% of the cameras I think you'd find in our schools, but also in most school systems, are there to record and to be able to access the record after the fact if you needed it. Our schools right now, receptionist or let's say the principal on their computer, they might have 6 or 8 kind of like hotspot type cameras where, they want to look at what's happening in the cafeteria or a particular hallway where maybe they've had instances in the past. But if they have 80 cameras, there's no one sitting watching 80 cameras. They're basically recording, and then if there's an issue, they're going back to review the record after the fact. They might just have like the hot type cameras that are up on a monitor. Even by adding these cameras, the vast majority, particularly at the elementary and the middle school level, it's going to be for that after the fact recording. We wouldn't be opening up or staffing any kind of office to like monitor or watch this type of equipment.
I mean, we're talking in this comprehensive plan a lot more than just cameras.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, I was
because-
looking for the pieces, I mean, there's a lot of things down there, so I'm kind of looking for a breakdown of how to get to like 245 under the copy.
Yeah,
We could do that if you wanted, even just like if you like the high level slide that kind of said, this is the cameras, these are the door alarms, those kind of things.
I think
Essentially,
that's what Dennis was kind of looking for, I think.
yeah, gap analysis to say, okay, we have cameras at the entrances. So what we're looking for is funding to have incremental cameras at X number of locations. We have, entrance doors that don't have alarms, don't have sensors on them. So, that's the kind of thing I think that would be helpful.
I think that's fair, and I think that could be publicly shared. I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. And we could prepare that for you for your next meeting.
Okay. I think
If someone really wanted to get like deep into the proposal itself, like I said, I don't mind individually sharing with members of the group, but I just don't want it really to become a public document. So that's my only apprehension on that.
I concur with that.
Yes, so when we prepare the agenda for November 30th, well, I'll be sure to include a spot for school security. and
Yeah, the
all.
only issue that I have, I'm not here on the 30th.
Okay,
That's why
that's
we
right.
jumped, for me to come to this one. I can see if Bill is available to come back, and then Linda has been here for the last couple meetings as well. She could be here. I'm out of state that day, so I just won't be able to be here that morning with you. But we can have that information for you that morning.
That's great, thank you.
I just have 2 real quick things to say. One, to commend all of you on your level of detail in all of your presentations. And 2, just one of the handouts that John sent us the other day is, I thought it was very helpful to have the school committee priority list of the requests that you've asked for. So you've already done the work of, well, if you could, and
Right.
you've pointed out that, well, the school committee has set the number 1 priority as the school security upgrade. So I just feel that's very helpful information, rather than our trying to
spent a
guess
lot of
what you
time,
think
yeah.
is most
But
important.
we have spent a lot of time too, but like the school committee's really thought well about this. And I think, safety is kind of number 1, and I think people can understand that. I'm trying to think, I think the code compliance issues,
That's nice.
in the kitchens was important. What was number 3?
Harrington.
Oh,
Parking
Harrington
lot.
parking. And a lot of that dealt with safety too. There was a lengthy
Yep.
discussion at the meeting about, just not having kids running between cars, trying to get into school and things along those lines. So I do think if you see, particularly in this year, your themes that emerge are safety and then sanitary code compliance type issues. Would we love to do it all? Yes. We're realistic in realizing that, over the years, there is those cutting that takes place, but they also thought it was important to just give you the priorities as they saw it. So,
I would
thank you.
second the comment about, this is a vast improvement in capital planning for the school department. So I know this is a lot of work that went into this, and, I commend you and your team for doing that work, because it really is helpful.
Thank
Being
you.
able to look at the total picture here.
I think John and I were on the finance committee back when the school department didn't have a capital plan. We instituted that requirement.
Yeah.
I
No, there's been
I
a
was
lot.
actually on the school committee when two superintendents before said, oh, by the way, we presented our capital plan to the capital planning committee, and I pointed out, like, how could you do that without the school committee voting? But, anyway, those were the days.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly remember having the town capital plan presented, and I don't remember who brought it up, and they're like, and the school committee was presenting their budget. There was no capital plan. It was like not even a thought. Wow.
Yeah, come a long way.
Yeah, yeah.
If anything comes up too in the next 2 weeks, if you want further information, just shoot me an email, and we can make sure you have it on the 30th, in case you finish that day and you start your prioritization, just so you have everything in front of you.
Thank you.
Good, Bill?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Very
gentlemen.
much. I appreciate it.
That concludes school facilities and technology. Next on the agenda is municipal technology. We have two projects to discuss. I'd like to invite Ted Luter, Municipal IT Director, and Matt Hall, Network Manager, present those two. And these are projects number 1 and 2, as you're looking at your detail sheets.
Okay, project 1 is the security camera upgrade. We, in the last year, we purchased a camera server, and a year ago, we didn't have any cameras that were going to the police department for viewing, live viewing. Now we have almost all town buildings have at least some cameras going to the police department on one network. In that year, we filled up our camera server, and we need to purchase a new one in order to continue expanding our camera network. That's about half of the cost of that project. The other half is for some firewalls and switches so that we can expand the security network and kind of make a completely separate security network. That's what the other half is for.
Ted, just wanted to ask, if you could just expand on it. You've had some requests, a lot of requests. Your department works closely with the police, but you've been having some increasing requests over the last year for cameras. If you could just touch on that.
Sure. So we've had a lot of, I'll give you a little more background. We've had a lot of separate camera systems throughout the town. DPW had their own camera system, Senior Center, McCarthy Field, Varney Playground. All of these separate camera systems that were just being recorded onto a DVR system. We've taken everything, all of those separate camera systems, and put them into one system where we have more storage. We can access those feeds remotely. We can access the video remotely. Everything's in one place. As things happen, like the accident on the river last year, those types of things, the police come to us and say, let's get some video down there. So the future of these projects are going to be probably getting more, getting cameras on buildings where we don't have cameras yet, and out in the community where the police decide that there's a need to have a camera in those places. According to the chief, we're going to have cameras at lots of intersections in the future. A lot of the placement of cameras is not coming from us, but coming from what the police deem is appropriate, an appropriate place to have cameras. We do make suggestions, and oftentimes the suggestions we make are they're agreed upon by the police. But the police also decide where they want to put cameras.
So the river landing was added last year, right?
Yeah.
Boat.
The boat launch, yes.
Yeah.
That was added last year. That project is not complete yet because the railroad has given us trouble. It's taken a lot longer to get the fiber down there because we have to cross over railroad tracks, and we didn't anticipate that problem, but the railroad is requiring a lot of extra work to be done. And that's stalling the project. We're ready to go. The camera's purchased. Cameras are put up at the the softball field there, so once we get the fiber down there, we'll get those on the network pretty quickly. In addition to that, there was cameras that were supposed to be put at, I think it's called, is it Freedom Park?
Friendship Park.
Friendship Park. There's a building that's going to be in the park that hasn't been put up yet, which is where cameras are going to be placed. In the next couple of weeks, because that building isn't ready, in the next couple of weeks, probably maybe a month, we're planning to put a camera up on the fire station that can zoom in on the park, just to get some eyes on that park until we can get those cameras put up. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. We've done upgrades at Varney Park. We've done upgrades at Hart Pond. Excuse me. The high school football field.
Dog park.
Dog park. We've done upgrades in a lot of different places. If you look at next fiscal year, there's $50,000. That's for an upgrade to this building, which is analog cameras, and we can do better at getting a look at the whole building than we currently have. There's also the senior center needs an upgrade on their cameras, which we could probably do next fiscal year. So we have certainly a couple more upgrade plans, and then from that point forward, it'll be new additions to the network.
Thank you, Tim.
Is there a, much like the school department's, gone through and attempting to create a comprehensive plan, do we have a comprehensive plan covering the town, municipal side? It seems like we've been doing things in a piecemeal fashion, so.
I'm going to let Matt answer that, but before he answers, I just want to say that we didn't even have cameras before last year. So, it has become much more of an important part of our department since we got our camera server last year. Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
So with the town side, the town's very large. And on our side, it's almost, we have to respond by incident. It's an incident base. So if we have an incident, say at Southwell Field, where there is vandalism, then we'll say we're going to put up a camera there. We can't just go around throwing up cameras and saying, hey, maybe we'll catch somebody doing something here. It's pretty much incident based. Maybe throw up a camera on Drum Hill after the big car crash a couple months ago. That was on Route 3. And we're looking at putting a camera up on one of the water towers where they're actually having vandalism issues as well. We're looking at the libraries as well. So we do have some cameras at the library, both libraries. And by adding more cameras there, we'll be able to catch traffic outside, traffic right around the library, looking at cameras at the cemetery for any vandalism there. Right now, we don't have a master plan. Again, it's strictly incident based. If there's an incident, we'll put up a camera. The town's just too large to blanket the town in cameras.
We also, we work very closely with Lieutenant Spence, and we have the ability to put mobile cameras up, which is important. They have asked, and it's important to them. So there are going to be some cameras that we can put up and take down and put up in different places. That's really all I want to say about that. But the plan is to kind of give the police what they want.
That's done now for the parade, just so you know. There are temporary cameras put up on the entire parade route as well as other security provisions. But I think where it's going long-term is, it's really coming from the police aspect, and it's really what you see now in society, anything that happens. But eventually, you would see cameras on this network that would cover Vinyl Square, the lower center of the community, the Rotary, and so forth. But that way, the police can sort of get a snapshot and dispatch of what's going on in real time. And so I think that's I think the need for the additional server capacity is, that's where, and you're seeing this more in urbanized areas as well. You go to downtown Lowell, the entire area is covered as well, not even to mention what Boston has. But that's eventually where you're going, is it's part of the public safety aspect, is the ability to pull up areas in real time to see what's happening. And then that way it gives you a head start to the response crews when they're going there saying, hey, there's a major issue going on, in Vinyl Square, and then they can immediately pull up, and we had one the other day where a car went into a building, and therefore they can immediately pull up what's happening there, what's the situation with the traffic, and then address the response. And it's probably not too far of a fetch to think even along the rail trail, probably eventually, that you would have ability to monitor that, because that's a very busy corridor that's even now busier with the new counts, now that the rail trail is expanded all the way into Acton.
The police have mentioned the rail trail.
Yeah.
We've looked at that, and that's probably going to happen at some point down the road. And Paul mentioned real time. We're looking at some software. We originally had it in the capital, but took it out because we need to discuss it more. But we're looking at some software that is, it's about real-time communication, where you can pull in different agencies, different specific people, and into a system where you can put up certain cameras, or you can put up documents, or you can put up maps, layouts of buildings, where anybody who's invited into that system can see that in real time, for real-time events that might happen. And that's part of a security plan that we have that's, hopefully coming in the next year or so.
If you really look down the road, it's probably something that would eventually be tied into the traffic signal. I know it sounds silly, but it's done in Boston and other areas. If there's an incident on the highway that causes a problem in terms of congestion in the town, you could see a situation where somebody's in the police station and they're controlling the lights, traffic signals along North Road through the center, so you can, push out the backlog. We're not talking that with this investment, but that's probably where you're going to end up within the next several years, that you have the ability to integrate the signalization as well as the security, so that you can address, because the biggest complaint we have in town is traffic.
Yeah.
In terms of from residential thing, everyone's aggravated with, why can't you do something about the situation, whether it's on Chelmsford Street by the plazas and so forth. And again, you have an incident, and we see it happen all too often. Something happens on Route 3 or 495, it just creates gridlock. And so I think eventually that's where it's going, so they could actually in real time saying, hey, what is it, rather than sending a patrol car saying, hey, get over to Chelmsford Street, see what's happening in terms of the congestion, you could pull that right up in real time, because as you know, the cost of this stuff has dropped so dramatically for cameras that you can have that kind of access. So I think that's eventually where it's going, and that's what we've talked about, the idea of having distinct separate server for camera, so it doesn't clog. You can't have that interfering with then clogging up your data network of the town operations or school operations, where you sort of have dedicated, servers for camera capacity.
Yeah, I should note also that the server that we're purchasing is going to be replacing a camera server at the police department with additional licenses and storage that we can put additional cameras on throughout the town. So the cameras that are currently at the police department would reside on this new server.
And it helps a few areas, like we've had some illegal, I guess for lack of a better word, dumping of debris over, Hard Pond and so forth. You've got cameras now that can go in there and they can, see the license plate, see what's happening, have a record, and deter. The idea is really to deter activity as opposed to, apprehending it. The idea is that if people are aware that there's surveillance, then they're less likely to do those type of things.
Seeing license plates is not an easy thing to do, but there are cameras that we can position in a way that make it a lot easier. And so where we have the ability, where we can see license plates, we make it so that those cameras can see those license plates. It just, that's what the police want, and that's what we're...
Years ago, we used to have the concern on Thanksgiving that somebody would come over and vandalize the football field, right? I remember when Kathy was on the committee. That risk is gone now, or in terms of the fact that if that happens, you'll have a record of, so I think, again, the technology sort of deters some of the things from not happening at all. But I know that was the concern, moving back a dozen years ago.
It would be nice to have it just for traffic analysis on polling day to see if they're.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You could, well, and
That was insane.
And that's one of the things now on our town's website is we have a webcam of the town common.
Yeah.
So you can now go on any time of the day and you can actually see what's happening on the common, what's the traffic. And you're right, for on polling day, you could put a camera up saying, what's it like in front of McCarthy?
Right.
So that way if somebody's going out, they're saying, oh, what am I looking at getting to?
We have plans for more webcams as well.
Hard Pond.
Hard Pond. We left a camera up when we upgraded Hard Pond. We left the old camera up, which is what telemedia is going to take over to do the web
cam, yeah, so you say, gee, what's it like over at the, I know it sounds silly, but
Yeah.
this is the today's thing, but what's it like over at the dog park? Do I want to go over there? Well, if you turn on you can just sit at home and say, oh, there's, the place is overwrought with people. You say, well, I'm going to go later.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. Now's a good time to go because there's only 3 cars in the lot. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the era of, that we're in nowadays where, people expect and look for those conveniences.
So the message is, leave your house with your disguise on.
At least have them in your car.
Fake license plate.
But it's common. I mean, I think you're seeing that if, you want to see what boats are on Lake Winnipesaukee right now, there's cameras all across the lake. You can.
You want to watch an eagle.
Exactly,
egg,
yeah.
hatch.
We actually have 2 cameras on the 2 lakes in town, so if somebody does fall through the ice this winter, dispatch
good.
can watch it live.
Yeah.
Very good, high-quality cameras that we, can give you really great information, give the police really great information if necessary.
We are looking to add more cameras again at the libraries. The libraries, adults and kids can be in the same place.
I was just
The
gonna
adults
ask
aren't
about that.
pre-checked, and people come and go as they please. It's not like we're the schools where it's locked down. Libraries are wide open.
Well, look at that crazy thing that was in the Winchester
Yes,
Library where
yes.
someone was stabbed.
Yep.
Young woman.
That's always been an area that we've talked about it, that is of concern, because those are adults who have not been Cory checked, and students go to that library, and, we need some kind of surveillance ability. I have a question about the relationship with the police, and it goes back to the school department budget item. Did you have that 11,000 in your budget? Did the police communicate to you?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm not sure exactly what it is, that $11,000. We make enhancements to the system and present it to the police and say, what do you think? And they either say, yes, we love that, or no, that's of no use to us. Typically, we'll make a mock-up of something and say, hey, what do you think of this?
But they would go to you, town side?
Basically, we go to them and
Okay.
we're trying to be proactive and say, we think this will help you. And we get the response, and generally speaking, we've made some significant changes that make it easier for them. I mean, right now, they can see all the cameras, but like you guys said, I mean, it's impossible to look at all the cameras. So one of the big things we've done in the last couple of months is create maps, a Google map with a layout of the building on top of it. So you can, and then we place on that map all the external cameras and any internal cameras on that map. Those cameras blink if there's movement on them. It'll be, there might be red if the camera's down. So that's what they really want. The police want to be able to just look at a map and be able to see kind of what's happening. They don't like, unless something's really happening at those locations, it doesn't matter to them. It's better for them to be able to just pull up a map and say, let's double click on that camera right there, and boom, that camera's up. So that's kind of what we've been doing for them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, so Chad, if you want to discuss your second project,
Second project.
is security.
Yeah, that was on capital last year. It's a door swipe system. We've actually been able to get that started because Gary was working on something down at DPW. It was a DPW project, and swiping was part of that project. And in talking with him, we were able to get at least the head-end system installed so that any future door projects can be part of the town standard. The schools are on S2 for doors. We have an S2 door system. It's the same system as the town standard. Currently, only DPW is on the town side, town standard. And we, just like the cameras where we had these silos everywhere, we have silos of doors throughout the town. We're trying to get them all onto a single system. The benefit of that is, anybody at DPW, they can use their card at the schools. They can use their card at DPW. And it's going to be the same for the fire department. Single card will get you into any building. Instead of having multiple cards to get into buildings, we're looking for a single system. Chelmsford Telemedia put a door swipe system on their at the highway department where they keep their truck. That was, it was a standalone system like we purchased for all the other ones. We're planning to put that on the network. You're going to use operational costs to get that onto this new system in the spring. So we'll have 2 on the system. And that money is to put all of the rest of the buildings. Did I list the buildings there?
Yes.
I have them here. Yeah, so it's going to be, it's both libraries, all 5 fire stations, town hall, cemetery. Those are all the buildings that we're proposing putting on this door swipe system. Some of those don't have a system at all. Some of those have a standalone system that we're converting over.
It also would record when people go in and out of each facility too, which.
It does.
If something were to happen or be missing or taking place, you then have a record. Right now, you have keys. You don't know who's coming and going, what hours, where, and what, you know.
Yeah, the system, if we really wanted to fully implement the system, we could have, each person has a card, we can have a picture of them, so that when they swipe in, their picture comes up. I don't see that we'll use that very often because we're not really watching live. But it does record every person. Every person's card has their name and it records when they come in. So yes, we can do that. And we can also, when they swipe, a camera could record that they have swiped and are going in the building. So both the camera system and the door swipe system can work together to give you a history of what's occurred.
So if we have a door swipe system at our schools, do we need, like, the Chronos times sheet system in addition?
I don't know.
It's interesting. Okay, just wondering.
All right, so is any further questions for Ted? That concludes the presentation on municipal technology.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Wraps up our hearings for today. On the agenda, you'll note we have the approval of minutes. I don't have the minutes available, but I will have those for your next meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 30th, so if anybody has any questions or comments?
So school technology is next week, the 30th?
Well, we had some year they're going to come back.
Yeah, we'll have an update on school tech.
They're going to come with an itemized.
Yeah, just with the high-level slides that Jay
Oh, so
talked
it's
about.
no computers, it was just the security system?
Just the security. Yep.
Okay, got it.
And so next week, just so everyone's aware, the town clerk is scheduled next week.
30th.
Excuse me, not next week, November 30th.
After.
Is town clerk, cemetery, and an update on school security.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
So if
Thanks,
no
John.
questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
so move.
Second. All those in favor of adjourning till November 30th, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.